Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Layla, and for today's video I want to talk about some personal finance stats. So I think for the last couple of years I have put out a video talking about financial statistics, usually around this time of year, so I figured I might as well do that again. Now since I'm in the United States, these are going to be stats that are personal finance stats that are about the United States. I wish I could say that things are looking better, but unfortunately they're not, and I feel like right now is actually one of the worst times that I've seen. I think that's really because of inflation, interest rates, people having a hard time increasing their income or switching jobs, or their younger generations are getting out of school and having a hard time getting their finances in order. But I do hope that since you're watching this, and if you watch other videos of mine and other personal finance YouTubers, that you are doing what it takes to improve your numbers and do not fall into these statistics, because I will say right now that all of them are negative. So let's go ahead and go through these. I'll talk about them a little bit. I'll also have all of the sources linked down below in my description box. But these are coming from Bankrate, LendingTree, the Federal Reserve, as well as MarketWatch. According to Bankrate, 59% of Americans are uncomfortable with their level of emergency savings. And this is actually a recent stat, so that's of May 2024. And this includes 32% who are very uncomfortable and 27% who are somewhat uncomfortable. Now, everybody's idea of being comfortable with their amount of savings is different, of course. There are some people who could have $20,000 saved up and they're not comfortable with that because of, their life situation. But then on the other hand, there could be some people who have $2K and are comfortable with that. But personal finance is absolutely personal, and if you're feeling uncomfortable with it, you're allowed to feel that way. Even if you have the $20,000 saved up or more than that, if you're uncomfortable with it, you're uncomfortable with it. These stats around emergency savings, I have never seen change. I have never seen them get better. It's always been bad. So let me continue with this. So 27% of US adults have no emergency savings. And this is actually the highest percentage since 2020. We all know that 2020 was a very unique year, but I feel like throughout 2020, things kind of got better for a lot of people in regards to their finances. Now, I know some people were on the other side of that as far as their finances go, and they were getting laid off or just having a really hard time. There were some small businesses that were really struggling, but I know a lot of people also were reducing their spending because we weren't able to go out as freely as we were able to before that. So that means saving money. Many of us were getting relief checks, and those were $1,000 plus a couple of times throughout the year. So some people were putting that towards savings or paying down debt, which is amazing. And then we even saw things like the student loan debt forbearance or other benefits if you had a small business or if you had children or a number of other things. And because we were able to save in one area, that allowed us to save in our emergency fund or pay down more debt. So now that we're years away from that, it's really upsetting to see this number be really high again. About 1/4 of Americans, of adult Americans, do not have any emergency fund. And that's really scary because I know a lot of these people own homes, or they have children, or they have pets. They have big responsibilities where if an emergency were to come up, they would not be able to pay for it. They would have to go into debt for that. And it just creates this whole vicious cycle. Bankrate also broke this down further by generation. And I'm sad to see that millennials are the highest amount that do not have an emergency fund. About 34% of millennials do not have an emergency savings, and then it's Gen Xers at 31%, Gen Zers at 29%, and then baby boomers at 16%. Continuing with some stats from Bankrate, more than a third of US adults have more credit card debt than money saved in their emergency fund. That's a lot of people, but they also share some positives here. So the majority of US adults have more emergency savings than credit card debt, so that is amazing. And this has increased over the last few years. So more people have money in savings compared to having credit card debt, but still over 1/3 of American adults having more credit card debt than savings is definitely not ideal. If you find yourself in that situation, you want to get out of that credit card debt as soon as possible, because I know it's costing you a lot in interest. And obviously, the more money that you can save up, the better peace of mind you have. And obviously, you're going to improve your finances. They actually go on talking about this. The specific question they asked is, which is higher, your credit card debt or the money you have in your emergency fund or your savings account? And 10% of responders said that they have no emergency fund, but also no credit card debt. So I don't know if that's great that they don't have credit card debt, but I'd also want them to have an emergency fund. But I will say that my mindset around having an emergency fund has shifted a little bit. Like, I don't think it's absolutely necessary to have a huge chunk of cash saved up. Like, if you have money invested that is somewhat accessible, then you're probably okay. But obviously I don't have the full picture here. I'm hoping that that is the case for this 10%, but I'm going to assume that it's just that they maybe recently paid off credit card debt and they're working on savings. I do want to focus on a couple of stats around women and finances. This is also through Bankrate, but they mention a Bank of America study. And with this study, they found that men have a 50% greater average 401k balance than women. There are also studies showing that women put away less than half the amount that men save. And these studies also show that women stress about finances more than men. I think this is so interesting because I would say all of these things tie together. And I think the cause of this is a couple of things. So a lot of women, I feel, are not as educated on finances. And that's not necessarily our fault, but kind of the way that the system has been set up from the past. So there was a time when women couldn't get credit cards without having a cosigner. So that was like within the last 50 years, and that is insane. I think some women are also afraid of investing. Like, if you don't understand it, then it can be kind of a scary thing to go into, so they just completely avoid it. Another thing though is that our incomes are lower compared to men for the most part. Obviously there's always going to be exceptions, and I think that this has been improving with time. But if your income is lower, and even if you're contributing the same amount to your 401k, but men's income is higher as a whole, that is going to be skewed because of that. So if they're putting away 6% with a higher income and women are putting away 6% with a lower income, their 401k is naturally going to be a larger balance. So yes, I definitely think all of those factors play a role in this. As a woman, I obviously think that it's very important for women to be paying attention to finances and be independent with numbers, and at least be educated with finances and be investing and saving and make wise choices, because yeah, it's very important. And I did want to talk about something real quick. This is not sponsored, but I am partnered with Sequin, and this is a debit card focused on women. And I actually had the pleasure of speaking with the creator of this card. Her name is Verinda, and she actually used to work at Visa and helped to build a card. Like, she worked on a very popular card for years and eventually created her own business and created this Sequin Card. Now, if you're a man, you can also get this card, but it heavily focuses on women and self-care with the things that we are buying as women. So like I said, this is a debit card, but you can get 6% cash back on things like getting your nails done, getting massages, shopping at certain beauty stores, Sephora, Ulta, 6% back on your gym membership, if you go to workout classes, at the pharmacy, the drugstore, all of that, 6% cash back. So I thought this was so cool. She's helping to fight the pink tax, and it's a debit card. So you don't have to apply for it and get approved. You don't have to worry about paying interest, any of that. There's fee-free, so you don't have to worry about that. And you get 6% cash back in those categories. So if you are somebody who has credit card debt, and when people have credit card debt, I do always suggest not using your credit cards while you're working on paying them down. So you could switch to something like this, make all of your purchases on here. So I am so excited to be talking about this and very happy to be promoting this, because it's a debit card. You're going to be using your own money, not going into further debt, not paying interest. Like, you can get cash back on the things that you're already paying for and not worry about all those extra problems. I do have a link. It is sequincard.com/Layla. That's also going to be linked down below in my description box, and definitely check it out if you're interested. You can read more about it on the website and let me know if y'all sign up. Let's move on to some more stats. So this is according to MarketWatch. Over 40% of Americans are unfamiliar with Roth IRAs, money market accounts, and high yield savings accounts. But nearly 70% of Americans familiar with 401ks do not use them. That 401k stat was very shocking to me, to know that people know about a 401k but don't use it, don't take advantage of it. I'm hoping that the people who don't take advantage of it just don't get a company match, so it wouldn't benefit them too much. But if you get a company match and you're not taking advantage of the 401k, you definitely need to be taking advantage of it, unless you are like living paycheck to paycheck and like absolutely cannot get ahead. It's not the right timing. I think that's why a lot of people aren't taking advantage of it either. So I can completely understand that, because even just giving up like $20 of your paycheck feels like $1 million when you are struggling financially. And now I can understand people being unfamiliar with money market accounts and even Roth IRAs, but it's such a bummer to see high yield savings accounts on this list, because everybody should just have one, you know? If you have money in savings and it is not in a high yield savings account, you need to open a high yield savings account. Like, I genuinely believe that through and through. If you're just holding it in Wells Fargo or in Chase, Bank of America, one of the major banks, you're not making any money on your money just sitting there. And with a high yield savings account, you're going to be earning money passively. That money can just stay in there and keep on growing and just make you more money. Now for some stats from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. In the first quarter of 2024, credit card and auto loans, their delinquency rates increased. And this was across all age groups. This isn't very surprising. If people are feeling the pressure from inflation, interest rates, they are missing those payments. And that is not good, because it's lowering your credit score, and then you're going to have higher interest rates. And again, this vicious cycle just continues. Also in quarter one, there's been an increasing number of borrowers missing credit card payments. Now for some stats from LendingTree. This one is interesting. So Americans' total credit card balance as a whole is 1.115 trillion in the first quarter of 2024. And this is actually down from Q4 of 2023, which in Q4 of 2023, the total was 1.129 trillion. And that was actually the highest balance since they started tracking in 1999. So this is through LendingTree, but actually that's from the New York Fed. That's crazy. So the highest amount of credit card debt ever was Q4 of 2023. Luckily, that did decrease in 2024, at least quarter one, but people are missing payments. That is increasing. Now, I'm not sure why there's no data for Q1 of 2024 about the average credit card debt, but for Q4 of 2023, the national average credit card debt among cardholders with unpaid balances was $6,864. And this includes bank cards as well as retail credit cards. Another thing that I found so interesting was who had the highest credit card debt by state. And the highest amount across all 50 states was New Jersey, followed by Connecticut, then Maryland, New York, and Massachusetts. And as you can see, these are all on the East Coast. These are all Northeast, actually. And I would say those are pretty expensive states. And they didn't seem to expand on why this is. I didn't see any further research on why these states have the highest amount of credit card debt. So if you live in any of these, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Because on the other end, the states with the lowest credit card debt, the lowest was Mississippi. And I feel like that's because people there just don't get credit cards. Like, they may be scared of cards, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Followed by Kentucky, then Arkansas, Alabama, and then Indiana. So those are the lowest 5, but Mississippi is the lowest across all 50 states. Those are kind of random and a little bit more spread out, but I would say that they probably have lower populations, and they probably just don't do as much shopping in those states. Like, if you think of New York or Massachusetts, like, there's a lot of shopping that goes on there, and definitely a lot more people. There's a lot higher populations and probably a lot more people who get credit cards in those states. So that's my thought process around those stats. Those are all the stats that I'm going to cover for this video. I do think these are interesting to look at every year or so hopefully you found this interesting as well. If you fall into any of these stats, particularly the ones that are more negative, that is okay. Like, we have all been there. There was a point in time when I had no emergency fund and I had a lot of credit card debt and a lot of debt in general. So we've all been there. Just keep at it. You can definitely get yourself to the other side. Let me know if y'all have any questions, and feel free to leave a stat down in the comments below that I didn't mention here. I know this video was heavily focused on credit cards and savings, that sort of thing, but there's tons of stats on like student loans and mortgage debt, so I would love to see some more. But otherwise, thank y'all so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one.